I'm Jordan.
And I'm Tyler.
And this is the Inside Music City podcast. Welcome to another episode of Inside Music City, where it's our job to talk to music industry professionals about the ins and outs of the music business.
This episode is brought to you by our wonderful patrons.
Yay! Thanks, guys.
You can learn more about becoming part of the Patreon family, as well as finding a lot of behind-the-scenes content by visiting www.patreon.com/Inside Music City. Our guest for this episode is Dr. Deen Entsminger.
Dr. E is a professor at Belmont University. He has taught in the School of Music since about 1988.
He currently coordinates the Undergraduate Music Education program, directs the Belmont Chamber Singers, teaches courses in music theory, composition, and choral methods.
He also mentors students in the undergraduate honors program and graduate music education program.
He has written and co-written dozens of choral pieces, and he's been a guest conductor for countless choirs around the nation.
This episode is a little bit different because, Tyler, you were actually out of town.
I was, yes.
So this interview is just Dr. E and I. We talk about how he came to love singing in choirs, the catalysts for him becoming a choral director, and some of the biggest challenges he's had to overcome. There are quite a few great words of wisdom, hilarious stories, and sentimental movie quotes in this episode. So I hope you enjoy. So Dr. E, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordan.
I remember the first time that I came to your office was a little bit before school started this past semester. I remember looking up on the Belmont website to see all the different choirs, and there's a lot.
Yes.
There's way more than I expected. When I transferred over here, there was only 3 choirs at my old school. Wow. And one of them was a women's only choir. But here there's how many? Like,
oh my gosh, yes.
10 or 12
at least, I think close to 10. I'd have to count them all out loud.
That's so crazy. I remember looking through all the different descriptions to see which one I wanted to do, and I noticed that the chamber singers, on the description on the school website, it says that it's just a small group, about 20 some odd students, and they rehearse without a piano. And I thought that was really cool. Why do you choose to rehearse without a piano?
All right, here's the story.
Yeah.
Takes me back a long way. Dean is an 18-year-old boy, brand new student at Shenandoah Conservatory of Music. That's a whole nother story, how I got in there. We'll save that. But I was a voice major, voice principal. Everybody was assigned an accompanist. And we were supposed to meet them before we had our lesson. We had the 24 Italian art songs, and I'd already been told to learn Caro mio ben. And met with my accompanist and walked into the tiny practice room. He looked up at me. He said, "What piece?" I said I said number 7 or whatever, because I didn't know the title in Italian. He said, "Okay, let's go." And he started playing, and I stood there. And he got to where I was supposed to come in, and he looked up. I don't remember what he said, but he had a look on his face. And he said, "Well, are you not going to sing?" And I said, "Well, I don't know it yet." And his whole body slumped over. And he stopped playing. He said, "Okay, let's go." And I thought I felt offended at that, because he was all slumped over. He took his fingers and began playing da 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 da. And I stopped and said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Look, all of you singers are all alike. Every one of you comes in here and expects me to play your notes for you." And he further went on to explain that nobody helped him learn his notes, because he's the accompanist. He has to know his part. He said, "But all of you expect me to teach you your notes." And I get tired of that. And I felt the room just changed to icy cold. And I'd never had anybody tell me that before, because my choral director had played our notes for us. I learned all my songs when I had a guitar. I played the record. I played the record over and over again until I learned the song. I didn't see what I'd done wrong, but I would, at that point, realize that I had not taken any responsibility for my own musicianship. I'd always depended on someone else to do that. Either not by saying I can't, but my choral director just said, "Tenors, here are your notes." And he was a pianist, so he sat at the piano. And that's how we learned. And that's if you've learned something in some way, you think that's how it's supposed to be done. So this is the first challenge I'd ever had to my concept of what it meant to be musical. I thought it was pretty musical because I memorized everything. I didn't need a score. Well, anyway, he was not happy, and I was not happy. I got very embarrassed, and when we got done, him playing the notes for me, and he did play them rudely. He didn't just play the tune. He played bing, 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 and I didn't know the Italian, and anyway, it was a horrible day. And that never left me. I remembered that for the rest of that semester, and I finally, at some point, even in our choral rehearsals, when the choral director would say, "Tenors, let's go over your notes," I risked raising my hand to say, could we sing it once?
Wow. And
that was very bold of me because nobody else in the room spoke, but I had already had this feeling like if I'm going to learn how to sing, I've got to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And he reluctantly said, okay, one time, but the tenors all looked at me like, what are you doing? He's going to play our notes for us. And I looked back at them to say, are you kidding me? That's what we've always done, is have somebody play our notes. So that would then propel me forward to have a mindset about what it meant for singers to practice their musicianship. I would get a job as a high school choral director, and it started there. Now, my high school choir was pretty large, and I realized time was upon us, and I was letting time dictate to me whether or not we were going to follow that pathway. But I also had a chamber group, a 16-voice group of kids, and we met around the piano, and I sat at the piano, and I'm not a pianist, so I would sit down and go, okay, here is our starting notes. Here are our starting notes. And I'd play the notes and off we'd go. And they would look at me like, are you going to help us? And I go, well, but shouldn't we try to get these notes on our own? So I had already begun that process there. And by the time I got to Belmont, of course, I'd been teaching for 10 years, and I went away to get my doctorate and then came here. I'd already developed a way of expecting my students to want to experience that rather than it being a burden for them to change their perspective. I know we can't see this on the microphone, but sitting up on the top of my shelf up here is a gift from my men's chorus years ago. It's actually a gift from them because it's a baby bottle and it has a nipple on it. They were thanking me for weaning them from the piano. So there's a keyboard on one side, and on the other side is the inscription. I'll show it to you.
Okay, great.
But there I was at Belmont with my first choir here, which was men's chorus, saying, why don't we try to do this line before we hear it? I bet you'll find out that you can do better than you thought. By the time I got to chamber singers, I had not discovered a tuning fork yet. I had a pitch pipe.
Okay.
And so I'd come in and go, all right, let's begin. And they all expected someone to be at the piano. I said, well, there's nobody here that's playing for us. All these pieces are unaccompanied. We don't need anybody to play for us. And I held up my pitch pipe and played the note, and off we went. So we'd already developed that. And it wasn't until several years down the road, I'm not sure if it was several years, but at some point, one of the basic conducting kids came in because they were supposed to observe choral rehearsals. And they'd heard about chamber singers and blah, 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 and the pitch pipe and everything. But what the girl observed, which was stunning, was when I'd play the pitch pipe, I'd play A, then I'd go basses, tenors, alto, soprano. And she observed that, well, you're not using a piano, but Dr. E, it looks like you're the piano. Because we'd stop and I'd go, guys, it's just a semitone, da, da. Yeah. And I'm singing it rather than playing it on a keyboard. I was right back to being 18 years old again, except I'm the one providing the notes for them. And I had to make a change. So I had to invite chamber singers. This was the first time I actually said, if I do this again, I want you to sock me. And so I'd play a pitch and then I'd have to stop and not sing. Well, the next year, it occurred to me, wait, I can do better. how about if I put the pitch pipe down and go give everybody in the room a tuning fork? And so at that point, we never looked back.
Incredible.
And so there it is. And it all started with me as a little 18-year-old kid being chastised by, righteously so, by the person who was playing for me, that I was just like every other singer. And then I began to realize that everybody else was called musicians. The oboists, the trumpeters, the percussionists were all called musicians. We were still called singers.
Yeah.
And then I got it. I understand why. Well, then we need to earn our musicianship by how we behave.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. When did music enter your life?
I got you. I'm there. My mom and dad had lots of records of Frank Sinatra and some other people whose names I'm sorry I can't remember at the moment. But one of my first things I did was they'd always have a record player and we'd listen to great songs. And of course that's kind of the beginning. I learned these songs just because they were on the record player, and I'd go over and pick them up and start over again. And of course I got in trouble because I scratched a record by lifting the arm up and moving it back because I wanted to hear it again. But I could sing all these songs, by just having heard them a couple of times. I think my emergence into a musical consciousness happened in the 6th grade. And I'll never forget his name, Wim Price, W-Y-M-M, Wim Price. Just before recess or lunch, I can't figure which, he was very tall. He would go back to the closet and bring out this battered old guitar, huge thing. Of course, when you're in the 6th grade, if people are taller than you, they look enormous. But he put his foot up on what I thought was the desk. It might not have been the desk, it was probably the chair. And he didn't do anything. He just started singing. And these were all Woody Guthrie folk songs. This land is your land, this land is my land, 500 miles. He would just start to sing. He didn't require anything of us. We would just sit there while he sang to us. And what I'd learned later, he was getting us ready. He was getting us out of the work mode and getting us ready for the transportation mode, which was go to lunch or go to recess. And psychologically, he was just getting everybody just to calm down. So he sang to us. And when there was a refrain, he'd say, sing along if you want. And so I began to learn musical form because he would sing a verse, then the refrain was always the same. And I'd look around and I didn't know if anybody was singing, but I was. And he had a face on him like he really liked it. And I had not seen that before. I'd not seen performers because I've been listening to records. Sometimes on TV you'd see somebody perform and you'd get a face. You'd see what they looked like when they sang. But I'd not really seen anybody do that live. Right. If it's TV, it's back in the day, it's a black and white set and it's bad reception. And this man was standing right in front of us. And he liked what he was doing. I just never thought about that. It pleases you. It's not just something you do, like take a pencil and add these numbers up. He was expressing himself, and it made him happy. And I thought, this is making me happy. So I joined in, and so that was kind of the early memory for me of that man singing to us, but not asking us to sing. He wasn't our music teacher. Our music teacher would come in, and we'd get things to whack on stuff, or she'd put a record on, and we'd sing to that, or we'd stand up and do stuff. But he didn't ask us to do anything. And what was nice was I was motivated to respond out of what my brain was telling me, rather than having it be an instruction to follow or to respond. I was self-motivated.
Then what happened? So did you join choir then?
Well, no, we didn't have really a choir. This wouldn't happen until the 8th grade. I was in 6th grades. My schooling was 1 through 7 was elementary school, 8 through 12 was high school. Okay. There was no middle school then. And here's one of the best stories of all, was in the 8th grade, we got to sign up for electives. So you take English and math and history and all that right. Stuff that's already on, because you're an 8th grader, you'll take those things. But you could take a class in this or that. So they explained, we have fine arts, industrial arts, home economics, and stuff. And boys, of course, didn't want to take home economics. But boys sure did want to saw and pound stuff. So I signed up for shop because it was the right thing to do. My dad built stuff. My dad would go outside and, he'd say, hand me the hammer or hand me this whatever. And I'd watch my dad build something to put something in or to stack stuff up on. And I just thought, yeah, that's what boys do. We saw and pound stuff. So I signed up for shop. Went to shop class. I forgot his name, but I'll never forget this. He had a finger or two missing. And he would explain to us that we have to be careful when we're in the shop because this could happen. He held up his left hand and his his index finger was gone at one of the knuckles, and we were all going, holy mackerel. Didn't think about that. So anyway, I didn't make it long in shop because my mother had already told Mr. Miller that I was signing up for choir, and I didn't sign up for choir, I signed up for shop. And when my schedule was mailed to the house, and she saw that I hadn't signed up for it. This is what happened. One day I was in shop, and the little speaker on the wall came on, and the principal or somebody came over and said, Mr. So-and-so, is Dean there? And of course I was there. And here's the thing that you would dread was these words, please have him come to the office and bring his books. Coming to the office doesn't mean anything. It could mean, you left something on the bus, or they just have you to sign something or give you a piece of information. But if you bring your books, that means you're going home. And I was trying to go back down the line of what had I done? I was really just flipping through my mind to think, was this yesterday? Was this last week? I was on the bus. I got in trouble on the bus. So anyway, I got to the office, and my mother was standing there with Mr. Helmer, the principal. And I'm looking at them through the glass, and she's talking to him, and he's talking to her, and I thought, what is this? So I walked in, and Mother turns to me and asks me where I should be right now. And I said, well, shop. And she just looked at me and said, no, you're not. You're supposed to be in Mr. Miller's chorus class. And I just saw myself being pulled back down this, my desire to be an architect or a carpenter, it was just being yanked right away from me. And I was marched down to the chorus room, my mom and Mr. Helmer. And got there, the door opened, there was a room full of kids with folders. They had just stopped a phrase or something had stopped, and Mr. Miller looked over, and there was a chair on the front row, and he waved my mom and pointed to the chair. And I'll tell you, I've never been on display so much in my life because there was 80, 50, 60 voices, not voices, but people all silent watching this little boy walk into the room and take his seat. And there was a folder on the chair. And I picked it up, put it in my lap, sat down. My mom left the room. I was crushed because I'd just been taken out of this environment that I felt like now I've actually chosen something that I believe I fit in here. It was all boys. And I was probably, in the 8th grade, maybe the youngest one in the class, but still, I was in there. I was going to cut and saw and pound stuff. But anyway, Mr. Miller then, told us all to get our folders up, and I was starting to get angry now because I realized what had happened. I just grabbed my folder and put it in my hand. And Mr. Miller asked me if I was going to join them. And again, he was speaking directly to me in front of all those other kids. And I just kind of pulled my head down, didn't say anything to him. And he just said, all right, everybody, let's go to this piece, page blah, blah. And he sat down at the piano and began to play. And they began to sing. And I was still so angry, I just kept my head down. So I was going to battle this man for the entire 8th grade year. It wasn't going to last long. I couldn't stand it because what was happening was around me, my memory of having listened to people on the TV, those record players at home, all that music that had made me feel good. Mr. Price, for heaven's sakes, who had sung to us and didn't require anything of us. All of those stimuli were already on. They were just looking at me going, Dean, get up here. Open your folder. You're missing this. But I was very mature, as we all are at various places in our lives, and I couldn't respond. So I thought, I'm going to win this one. And of course, there was nothing to win. At some point, they were doing something so marvelous, I couldn't stand it anymore. And of course, I began to slowly sit up because everybody else was on the edge of their chair. And I didn't open the folder yet, but I'd already learned all the music, just from hearing. I knew where the tenors were, and I knew the piece. And so I, at some point, gave in, sang, and that year I was a shepherd in the Christmas/choral thing. We had a shepherd thing when I was a shepherd. I have a picture of that. It's so cool. And it was, we did back in the day in the public school, it was actually okay to put on a show where you were doing that and you're singing the Christmas music and stuff. But that was it. I had nothing. I had no more argument. That was it. 8th grade.
Yeah.
By the way, I've shared this with other folks too, because I knew that I was kind of very active as a kid. I couldn't sit down. I couldn't leave folks alone. I was always bounding around the room, just either energy or what I'd learned later in life was ADD.
Okay.
There was no way to diagnose that then, but boy, Dean won't stop talking. Dean won't stop. Dean won't. On my report cards, and I just seemed to be everywhere. My mind was somewhere else. My eyes were out the window until I got in the 8th grade and sang in the choir. And the choral music was requiring all those things of me that I had not connected to in other subjects. By the way, my silly motions in other classes, when I didn't have anything to do and I was moving around a lot, music was actually causing me to move in ways that were not predictable but were understandable. I could actually sway and move, and that was all I needed to do, was to respond to a downward line in the music or something that got loud and you lift your chest up, and I found that I wasn't making anything up anymore. And by the way, what was happening in my brain was it was saying pitch, duration, loudness, softness, a nuance. All those things expected of you when you sing or when you perform were I was connecting to all of those things, which meant I didn't have any room to be distracted or off on some other tangent. Music was filling up all those spaces that before were empty.
So you've been a choir conductor for many, many moons.
Yeah.
When did your hands come into play?
Wow, how sweet. June of 1966. I'm 16 years old. My choral director said, this past year you auditioned for and were accepted into a district choir, which meant you had to try out. You were accepted. You got that experience. But that happened over on a Friday and a Saturday. You audition, you get the music that's been picked, you learn the music, you go to the event. There are about 180 kids in the choir. The guest conductor comes up, and you work on all the music, and then you have a concert. That's an auxiliary experience to what you're doing in your classroom. And it's not for everybody. You have to audition. So not everybody in the program of every school gets to participate. So it's kind of an honor to get accepted into something like that. But that was over a weekend. And he said, we have a camp in Virginia that meets in June. It's a whole week. And I thought, well, if I like this over 2 days, this is going to be heaven. So he said, you need to go this summer. And so we, and it cost something, but my parents were always, once they saw me behaving better, and it was because of music, they were, anything that has to do with music, we're going to support you in.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so I got to go to Virginia State Music Camp, and it was the same thing. You got a packet of music. If you were in high school, you'd be in the festival chorus. If you're in middle school, and I guess we did have a junior high at that time. But anyway, you'd be, like, if you were this old, you'd be in the this age group, and then they had a women's choir. They had an orchestra. It was huge, wonderful thing. Well, anyway, we got in, we sat down, we had a pencil and a score, and up on the stage walked our conductor. So now I've experienced this once, but this man's going to be with us for a whole week. And one of the first things he did was we warmed up, and he had, as a smaller person, a younger person, sometimes people look huge to you, or they look bigger than they really are. But the thing that was so remarkable about this man was the size of his hands. He just looked like he had enormous hands. And what he was doing was simply getting us to sing. And he would wave his hands in one direction to have us sing 5 notes, and wave his hands, and, so like his palm would move from right to left, and his palm would move backward. And we would just sing. And the first time I'd actually seen this, I saw by the gesture of his hand exactly what he wanted us to do. And then we'd start singing the piece of music, and he would lift his hand or drop his hand, or he was doing things that he didn't tell us what he wanted. His hands were doing that, and everybody seemed to understand that. When he wanted it softer, he would put his hand in front of his chest and move his head back, as though the sound was offending him. It was too much, and we got quiet, and then he'd turn his palm over. His palm was up in the air, and we'd just start to sing. We would start to sing louder. Anyway, my high school choral director conducted us from the piano. His hands were always on the keyboard, so he'd nod at us to come in. I'd never seen someone actually use their hands to deliberately make sound go the way it should go. So I was into that the first day, watching this man's hands. It was incredible. And there it was. I'm 16. I'm looking at this man. And of course, when you're 16, you don't know what you're going to be doing the next year at school or anything. But I went, I want to do that. I'd never seen anybody do anything like that before that didn't require conversation or speech. And later at the concert, he would just barely move his hands, where before he had moved his hands greatly to get us to understand the shape of the sound, loud, soft. But at the concert, he barely moved his hands at all, and we already knew exactly how loud, how soft to get. And what he was doing was smiling at us to go, that's right. I could not recover from that. That was so... I'm getting emotional right now just remembering Paul Salamonovich was his name. He's passed on now. There's a man who has also passed on, Rodger Wagner. Rodger Wagner and Robert Shaw were the great American choral conductors. And there are more, but I'm not going to go into that right now. It's just that Rodger Wagner was on the West Coast in L.A., and Shaw was in New York City and would soon be in Atlanta. And these were the dynamic choral conductors in the United States. And what I'd learned was that Paul Salamonovich also was in L.A. and was apprenticing with Rodger Wagner. When Rodger Wagner would go on a tour, he would leave a choir at home and take a touring choir away, and Paul Salamonovich would work with them. So that's how we knew who this guy was. So he was kind of like next in line to Rodger Wagner. And I was actually in the ACDA conference when Rodger Wagner turned his literal baton over to Paul Salamonovich.
Oh, wow.
I'd grown up. I was now a high school choral director and saw this. Wow. And I then realized who Rodger Wagner was and who Paul was to him. So that's what happened to me in the summer of my 16th year. I saw and got to work with that man. And his hands, I'd never seen that before in my life. So I wanted to do that. So I went back next year. Mr. Miller, can I conduct a piece? Mr. Miller, will you let me please conduct a piece? And when we're done, I'll show you. I have a picture of me conducting my high school choir.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was it. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to learn how to make a choir do what this man had made me do.
Yeah.
Or not made me do, but made me feel.
One of the very admirable qualities about you, and this isn't coming just from me, it's coming from everyone that I see interact with you, is how much you feel the music and how expressive you are, even when just listening to music, but especially when engaging with it, whether it be with your hands or through singing. That doesn't come easily. Yeah. That is not an easy thing for people to do. It's sometimes just an innate ability that certain individuals have. Can you kind of give us a look into what that's like for you?
Wow. Well, again, Jordan, I go back to me as a child, those times I got to see people perform on TV, and I'd watch them close their eyes. I'd watch them, because they had a microphone or something. I didn't have a microphone when I was doing what I was doing. I was just watching them interact with the music. And so I saw that expressive quality. My sixth grade not music teacher, but Mr. Price, would close his eyes, would open his eyes, would throw his head back just before he sang a loud note. And I'm seeing that. I'm watching people model this behavior for me. And I think, first of all, the very, very first thing we do as humans is we imitate. We see something happen and we go, well, I wonder if I do that, will I get the same effect? And I think I was maybe, again, imitating. I was shadowing things I'd seen. One of my earliest memories was the first night that Barbra Streisand was on TV. And if you look at any video of Barbra Streisand, there's probably not a more expressive person. And so I'm watching this. And of course, another story in my life is the Beatles, who came along and ruined my musical career because I was going to be a guitar player and a singer, probably a folk singer. And folk music just went out when the Beatles arrived because they championed bands. You have to have 4 at least in a band, and I was just with Deen with a guitar. Yeah. So my life was over. Or at least my singing career was over. But the Beatles, and I hated them because they were shaking their heads around. But the point was that music invites you to be a participant. And by doing so, you're free to let folks know how it makes you feel. So I've got all these wonderful images of my youth seeing people react to what they were singing. Not being told to, but just simply reacting. So I began to practice that. By the way, to the dismay of my colleagues in my high school choir, because I'd get back from a district course or even the summer camp, the next year when we'd start to sing, I'd already started to express myself. And some of the folks who were just taking choir to sing were like, hey, calm down, man. You're getting way too overboard here. It's just a piece of music. And I don't know if they said that to me, but I know what my visual response would have been if they had said, which we can't see on a microphone. But I would not have entertained that. I would, in fact, look back at them and go, how can you not respond to this? By the way, which would then make me want to define what it is that's making me respond. Because I hadn't defined anything yet. In fact, Jordan and I haven't thought about this in forever. That I was actually at that point trying to think, well, why am I reacting this way? Which, instead of just singing the music, made me want to go look at the music and find out what happened there. What was that chord? Because I really liked that. And I'd find out that, gosh, somebody wrote the music so that that chord would show up at that specific moment under or over that text. I'd never thought about that someone designed music so that it would have an effect on the listener. And I began to, in my own way, put that together. Well, no wonder Frank Sinatra looked the way he looked. No wonder Barbra Streisand. Wait a minute, Mr. Price threw his head back right before he sang this note on this word. I think I had license because I gave myself license to be expressive. And what I found out was it was genuine. I wasn't doing it so folks would notice me, because most of the folks who noticed me were saying, hey, calm down. They weren't going, oh my God, Deen, this is so beautiful. Which, by the way, when we're given positive reinforcement, then we're probably going to keep doing it till it gets overboard. Yeah. I mostly got just, hey, what's the big deal? Yeah. But by having folks ask me what the big deal was, I realized, well, Deen, you got to tell them what the big deal is. Which meant I had to start looking at music and understanding what was happening that would make me want to respond that way. Rather than just saying, oh, I love music. And go, well, yeah, so I began, and listen, I have not talked about this very thing, I don't believe I've ever talked about this. I mean, I've never, ever been to a place where I've said that my response to music then needed to be defined because people didn't understand what it was I was doing, as they themselves had not reached that level of awareness. And I thought, well, then it's your job, Dean, to tell them that, didn't you hear that chord? Mr. Miller, could you play that chord again? I don't know what the chord is, but it's got a bunch of notes in it. And that chord is about to go to this chord. I hadn't taken theory. I didn't know anything about that. But just, it was doing something that made me respond. And now I'm looking for how to define how to measure my response against what has happened in the music. At some point, I want to go back and write this down because I've not thought about this. By the way, as a prelude to me being a teacher, teachers need to tell folks things. At the very basic level, we're saying, here's something, and let me show you how this works. And I would not have thought about a defining moment in my life as I need to know more about this so I can help people understand why I'm reacting this way. Yeah. So you can't just react. You've got to be responsible for people who don't get it. I'm making a gesture like I just found something that I had never, ever realized was the catapult into being a teacher.
So I guess semi-subconsciously then, through your teaching career, has that been sort of a goal of yours, an underlining goal of showing people how to feel the music and how to experience it and be invited?
Well, and I got to tell you another moment in my teaching life after I'm going to answer that. After graduating from college, I got a job as a choral director at a high school in Richmond, Virginia, and I'd followed a very worshipped choral director who had taken a sabbatical or something, and I was hired. They thought maybe for that year while she was out doing some other work, she was going to come back and take that job again. And what I met was a very, very well-trained choir. Time would work on things, and she actually did not come back, and I would stay at that school. But what I thought I was supposed to do there was to have a great choir and have people kind of discover me, because I'm a great choral director, or so I thought, because I'd already learned how to wave my hands, and because I was imitating Paul Solomonovich, I had my hand gig down. I had gone to a conservatory of music, and woo, that's a big deal when you're at a conservatory. And so I'd graduated with maybe more problems about my needing to share my self-image with others than actually being a teacher. I wasn't a teacher. I was a choral director, and I was a good one. And I think I wanted people to know that. And what happened was, when I began to teach, the kids I wasn't inviting them. I was demanding them to do the things I asked of them. Because I hadn't, again, just immaturity, which I don't mind at all embracing, because we can't be mature until we recognize what isn't mature about us. So at some point, my sweet high school students, and the metaphor is I'm up on that pedestal, not that they had built, I built it. Mm-hmm. I built it nice and high so that I could be observed for all the good stuff that I was doing. And what they were doing was, they were so far away from me that they could not appreciate what I was doing, because I wasn't letting them appreciate. I was controlling their responses. And at some point, and this is a great metaphor, is they just decided to either quit or bring me down. And some of them who were really interested, because they saw something behind that facade of mine that could be interesting if they could only get closer. And so they did. They just toppled me. I just came crashing down right into the room with them. And it wasn't like a den of lions. It was a den of people desiring to know why this was so cool, and had to start over and begin to realize the things that I just shared with you. It was okay for me to share those things because I was being vulnerable. And oh my God, that can get you in so much trouble until you realize that the very people with whom you are being vulnerable have already been vulnerable to you. They've already joined you. They're in. And I just, because I was so young, I didn't realize that it was a shared experience. I was thinking it was all about me. And the moment I realized it didn't have to be that, I returned to my childhood-like state, which nobody had found problems with except the kids in the choir who told me, you need to calm down, you're just too excited. Mm-hmm. Or you're making us look bad, but which is probably the kind of the world thing is, sit down, you're rocking the boat. That's from Guys and Dolls. And but anyway, I realized that if I wanted people to really participate, I had to show them why it was so magnificent. And I'd already worked all that out. I just was, I'm going to say the word afraid, but I hadn't learned how to share that. I thought after getting out of college I was supposed to already know everything. And if you dare show a side of you that doesn't know everything, you might be afraid that folks will think that you're a phony or that you're really not that good. And what I realized, they wanted to know why it was that beautiful. So I'd spend the rest of my young life building the vocabulary to tell them why something was so magnificent. And the moment I did, oh my gosh, the ensemble began to throw their heads back. I don't mean that literally, because that's not a good vocal posture, but I'm going back to what Mr. Price did. His head would rise up and then he'd sing that loud note. Well, my choir began to do that too, because now they wanted to, because I'd learned to invite them. That was a great word you said. And, by the way, when we discover something magnificent, there's no looking back. There's no memory when you turn around and go back, well, who was that other guy? That person falls so far away from you that you don't ever have to worry about explaining him or apologizing for him. And they didn't want one. They didn't want me to apologize. They just wanted me. Did I answer that? Or,
yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Good.
This has been great. I'm going to go from me.
There you go.
I'm going to be selfish and ask you a question that I'm wondering.
Yeah.
I have been in choirs since my senior year in high school.
Okay.
So it's been a few years. And for me, choral music has changed how I think about and feel music. Because like you were saying, it's an experience that you get to just jump into and you get to be a part of. And I love having music not be dependent on me, but me being just a little cog in the big machine that is choral music. You need the people next to you. You need the people across the room and the different voice parts. You need the people of the same voice part with you. So that way you can all work together to make one cohesive sound in a choir. For me, because choral music is such a big part of my life, I'm trying to find out how I want to keep pursuing it after I get out of school. Right. Because for a lot of people, including me, there's only so much you can do with choirs. You can be in it in school, in high school, in middle school, in college, and then sometimes that's it. If you're lucky enough, then you have a community choir that you can be a part of. Maybe at your church you can be in a choir of there, or there's like professional choirs that tour and that have world-renowned names, right? On the other side of that, you can also conduct choirs, like what you're doing. Right. I would love to conduct a choir, but the hard part that I'm finding is because I'm not sure I want to make a career out of it, I don't know if I want to pursue it in my studies at school. So what does it take to become a choral director, and do you have to go to school for it? Right. Or can you just feel the music, and if you have a passion to transfer your emotion and share the music with others, can that be a possibility for you? Yeah. Can you conduct choirs without a degree?
Well, and I'd have to actually not stop now, but I'm going to invite you to check out Robert Shaw's pathway. Okay. He did not, I don't believe he had an undergraduate degree in music. I believe it was in something else, and then he, this of course was back in World War II, and he had the collegiate chorale. But that's for another time, because I'd have to stop and go find out all that.
Yeah, Robert Shaw.
One of his protégés was teaching at the University of Richmond. James Erb was his name. Of course, he was a mentor of mine after I became a high school choral director. And James Erb had, I think, a degree in philosophy or a degree in something else. And he found out that he wanted to work with sound. And he would later and of course I don't have all the facts here, but I think if we looked back on their lives, that was not what they did when they were young. They came about it in a whole nother time frame. Gosh, I think about any great performer that we might know. I mean, okay, one of the people I understood the least understood performer from my memory is Bob Dylan. What a horrible singing voice. But who told him he couldn't sing? And so my point being that there are times when someone learns a craft by applying themselves to it. I'll always go back to Mr. Price. He just played loudly because he was a big guy, and he just banged it. In fact, his guitar right under the sound hole, the little plastic thing that keeps the pick guard, was gone, and there was this arc of wood that had been scraped by his hands and that's how he had, shaped his guitar. And I wouldn't ever think about, well, where did he learn to do that? Because what he was doing was enough for me to be drawn into that experience. Now, sure, for me to have been a high school choral director, I had to have graduated from a college with a teaching license. And, by the way, my principal did not, I'll never forget this. I interviewed with the principal at the high school where I was applying. My interview consisted of these observations. He says, I see you went to college and you graduated. He didn't ask me a question so much as he said, he complained about all the time he spent in the hallway finding students out in the hall. And he said, I just need to know that you can keep your kids in your classroom. I went, well, yeah, yes, sir. And that was pretty much the interview. He wanted to make sure that I wouldn't let them roam around in the hallways. I thought, well, no, that's not even something I'm prepared to tell. I was going to tell you about all the great things I can do with a choral group, but if you want me to keep them in the classroom, that's it. And then they hired me. So what I mean is I never really had to take a conducting test. I did all the other things that got me approved for doing what I did. When I came to Belmont, part of my interview was not conducting. Because my resume, I'd been a high school choral director for 10 years. I'd worked with my graduate assistantship at Florida State. I'd worked with the university singers there, blah, blah, blah. I think that unless somebody were to stop you and go, where'd you get your information from? The fact that you're passionate about it, we could probably convince a lot of people about things. And I don't mean we're misinforming them, but I think somebody who has a high affect and can follow it up with information, I think those are our credentials. Now, I don't mean to be naive about the fact that, yes, we should know where one is in a beat pattern. We should know the different patterns, because sometimes the choir is going to say, can you conduct? Because choral directors are notorious for waving our hands around in the air until we get in front of an instrumental ensemble and they go, pardon me, where's one? Especially if one isn't always in the same place at the same time. But anyway, my point being that when we discover a love for something, it's something we pursue. And what we do is I'm sure we'd find a way to incorporate whatever it is we're trying to get out of it. We'd find a way for that to happen, which is why we're in college. By the way, the good news for any of us who teach college, we're in school forever. I don't ever have to graduate from this place. And I know that graduation is good. I've already graduated 3 times, and so I was supposed to be in the world doing something else. So the school doesn't want me anymore, but that's what this is about. This is where I was supposed to be here. So my idea would be, when something gets right up under your heart and your ears and all of your sensory apparatus, then it's trying to tell you something important, because your experiences have already led you to that place where it's like, I'm in. What do I need to do next? And the next thing you need to do is to find out And you're right. What do I need to do in order to work with a choir? Well, you're sitting in front of someone who, while you're at Belmont, can make that happen. Because that's our job, is to propagate more people who want to be musical, and to the degree to which they can be. I mean, when folks all walk across that stage tomorrow, they're going to go to a different place, perhaps. But the idea is it's like anything. You have a curiosity about it, and you go find out what it would take. I'm going to go back quickly to shop class. That I got yanked out of shop class. My teeth are gritting. Yanked out of shop class in the 8th grade, but I never realized that. I never forgot how much it meant to me to want to work with wood. So I do. I build things because I have whatever this mind is that can see something. I can take a look at something, walk away from it, go to Home Depot, buy all the stuff I need, and go put it together. Because that's how my brain is wired, and it's because of music. And so I'd missed shop class, but that didn't stop me from being curious about, I wonder what would happen if how would I go about this? And then you do. So I become a kind of a handyman, carpenter person, and build things. You've been to my house, you've not been on the back deck, but I actually built the deck out because it was too small.
Oh, wow.
So I took off the railing, tossed it in the yard, went to Home Depot, knew what I needed for joists. I knew you needed pieces to go like this, and then and built 6 feet more onto the deck all by myself.
That's incredible.
Well, so the idea is when something is that important to you, you want it to be a part of your human fabric. Yeah. And then you say, well, could I let this go? And if the answer is no, then you make room. I mean, I know I was going to be a choral director at 16 because he waved his hands in front of me. And I could have been naive, as we all are, when something happens that seems grand. We could go, oh, I want that, oh, I want that. But I'd never, ever seen that before. And I was right in the pathway of music when the next musical thing occurred, which was those hands.
Yeah.
So,
what about being a conductor is the most rewarding for you?
For me, it's all about what I give away. Mm-hmm. If when I'm done, I feel empty, that's probably the most rewarding, is the fact that something has occurred, which is why when we sing, I move off to the side of the ensemble when the audience is clapping. There are some conductors who will just stop, turn around, and bow. Right. And they're bowing in front of the choir. And for me, psychologically, that's not where I belong. I belong away, because the thing that just happened was the singing. It wasn't this. It was what people heard. They heard the sound and not saw the man. So when I'm doing what I'm doing, when it is being received, and it's not that I don't feel anything, it's just by emptying, it's just that I came in with a bag full of stuff and everybody reached in and got something. And I'm walking out of the room with an empty bag, metaphorically. And so for me, that's what it's about, is somebody just took something that belongs to them, by the way, because that's why they came into that room. They wanted something. And we create the environment, we create the culture and the space where all of that is possible. And for me, it's been a long road to get out of the way, because I started out as a 22-year-old high school choral director building my pedestal, getting me up as far as I could, because I was afraid if they saw that I was that young, and what if they asked me a question I couldn't answer? Mm-hmm. I didn't know that yet. And by the way, disposing of all that, boy, does that light you up. You don't have to worry about what you think you ought to know, because everybody's a part of that process. And by the way, I leave a rehearsal, I'm also full because people have donated things to me. They've given me their patience, they've given me I could go down the list of all the things. But I think that's it for me, is I feel empty. Okay. And I come in prepared to have my pockets cleaned out, mm-hmm. because I came with stuff I want to give away, and then when I do, I just feel wonderful. It's the greatest feeling on the earth, to be lighter when you leave the room than when you came in.
Yeah. So thinking back through your conducting and teaching career, what have been some of the hardships or mistakes that you've had to kind of jump over?
Absolutely.
And how did you fix them?
First thing out of the bat was being angry. When I'd go to Florida State University to earn my Ph.D., I took a class called Behavior Modification. And I learned some things in there that both I was excited about because, oh, I was doing that. And then, oh my God, I did that. So one of the things that I learned early on was I had impatience for the time it took for a group of kids to learn something. And I'd get angry at them because, didn't we just go over this? And the next pass they took, by the way, was going to lead to this. The next time they took a pass at it, they sang a little more quietly. I go, hey, come on, show me. Oh, I'd raise my voice. Well, when I raise my voice, their voice diminishes. And this happened one time. I looked up and I saw some sopranos talking, and they were over to my left. And I took my hand, there's the piano, the upright piano, and I slammed it. By the way, it hurt my hand so badly. But I was really ready to make a point. Slammed my head down the piano. The accompanist, by the way, shrieked because she was down, looking at the score. Mm-hmm. And she leaped back. She was crying at some point. And I just pointed at the top row and said, what are you doing? I said, you're wasting time in here. You're talking while I'm trying, whatever I was trying to do. Mm-hmm. And one of the sopranos just leaned back and said, Mr. Entsminger, we were having a problem with page 7 and we were trying to go over that part. They were going over the part together. They weren't talking. They were discussing the music. I had not told them that they couldn't do that, which is what I'd learned in behavior modification. Set up an expectation. Let's take a pass at this. When we get done, would everybody please be still for just a moment so I can tell you what I heard? Give them an instruction. Give them an expectation, and then you have reason to react. Yeah. I hadn't told them anything. I just got done. I heard the voice. I slammed my hand. Blamed them for talking when they shouldn't have been talking. They had no expectation not to talk. And I'd learned that later. Dean, if you want something to happen, tell them, I'd like this to happen next. And then you can measure whether or not that occurred. So anyway, they were talking about the music, and I got mad at them. And I had to change that behavior quickly.
Yeah.
So what I began to do was I made sure we had section leaders in each section, and when we'd stop, I'd look at those 4 people who would then go, okay, we need to go over page 5. I was helping to build responsibility on the ensemble, at least to help me control at that moment, which was just an unregulated temperature. I just didn't know what to do. When somebody didn't meet my expectation, later I would learn, well, then tell them what you expect of them. One of my colleagues gave me one of the best pieces of advice. Don't tell people what you don't want them to do. Tell them what you want them to do. So I'd go, sopranos, don't sing it like this. La, la, la. Come on. Now, what did I just do? First of all, I insulted them because they weren't singing it like that. I was mocking them. Well, why wouldn't you show them how you want them to sing it? Sopranos, please, would you sing it like this? Yeah. Now they know what's expected. I was doing everything upside down. And it took a little while, but I realized that you have to provide an environment for them to want to do something, which leads me to Mark Cherry, chamber singer years ago. Okay. And I stood up in the circle and said, basses, please, come on. We need to get this. And Mark looked right into my eyes and said, well, why don't you let us take another pass? I realized what I'd just done was the same thing I'd done in high school. I'd gotten frustrated by it not happening according to a timeline I'd never shared with them. I'd never say, why don't we get this in 3 passes? I wasn't even counting. I just knew that at that moment I needed to be righteous. And he said, why don't you let us take another pass? And all of a sudden I stepped back and said, absolutely. And the basses got together, the first pod. They all stood up, they've got in a circle, which I hadn't thought of, and they sang the part with each other. And then they stopped and they said, well, here's where we're blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going, oh my God, this is happening without me. And I wanted to feel offended that I wasn't in charge of that. Then I realized, well, Deen, this is the effect of a negative attitude on your ensemble. They're afraid of you. You remember high school? And so Mark made that the mantra of the group. Let's take another pass. And now there's no fear. There's no worry. There's no... All we want to do now is do it right. And Mark got the basses up in a circle. And I thought, what a great idea. Anytime we make a mistake, stand up and step out of the ensemble, and your cohorts will come with you, and you'll form the pod, and we know that that's a mistake, and you're going to fix it. I didn't do that. That was discovered for me by me demonstrating an impatience for the ensemble and somebody being brave enough, like Deen was. Deen was brave enough in his college choir to go, would you let the tenors try it one time without the piano? And the director reluctantly said, well, okay. And there was Mark behaving just like I would. And there it is. It was all born because that's a better way to do it. It's better. It lasts and it's inviting, and that's what we should be.
One of my favorite memories with you is at the beginning of the semester when I was struggling with, should I stay in the choir or should I go, because of things that had happened financially. And I came up and I was talking to you, and you said something that I'll never forget. You said, this room is a sanctuary and you belong here. And that, I guess, to me was a catalyst of seeing you just being so open and loving to everyone that you meet and everyone that you see. What instilled that in you? What instilled this love for every being and every creature that you just so freely give to everyone?
Thank you. It's about 80% what you just said and about 20% my father. I'm going to get through this if I can. My sweet dad could not sing a lick. He had no musical voice at all. But when his son discovered his voice, Deen discovered his voice, my dad didn't miss the opportunity to be at every concert. I have pictures of me. Every concert, my dad was in the audience taking a picture of me, which, by the way, sometimes can be embarrassing because you want your parents to get out of the way. But my dad had me stand up. I was on stage at District Choir. He walked down to the front of the stage and did this. I'm going, Dad, oh, please go sit down. But I did. I stood up. The whole choir is seated, and I'm standing, and my dad took a picture of me. Two quick stories. One is I wanted a guitar. Dad couldn't afford it. He didn't have a good job. The guitar was from Sears, the Silvertone. I wish I still had that, by the way, because it would be worth a mint now. But anyway, I played that to death until I got my next guitar, which I still have. It was $13.95, and Dad couldn't afford it. He put it on layaway, paid $1 a month or whatever. We were trying to get to Christmas, and finally I got my guitar. And I was impatient because I thought, come on, my other boys have a guitar. And I didn't get that. And I would get it later. That he sacrificed for me in that way. And I finally got my guitar, and then I proved that his investment was worthy because I played the guitar. And well, that's another story for another time. But that's where my own personal musical life began. My choral life was already there, but Deen with a guitar was a whole nother adventure. All right, we'll move ahead real quickly. I got into trouble. It wasn't my fault, and the judge would say so too, by the way. I was arrested for child abuse. Quick story. I'm coming home. I have my dry cleaning behind me. A boy's coming up on one of those three-wheeler things, and he runs right into the back of my legs. And this family's, their children have been doing all kinds of stuff. I lived in an apartment complex. And I'm falling backwards, and I turn, and there he is, and I reach down, and I put my hand on him to make sure I didn't fall on him.
Right.
Moved over to the side. I said, "What are you doing?" I was upset, and he runs off, and I went, "Oh, shit!" And sorry, cut that out or leave it in. Anyway, I went inside, and later the door would bang, and there's this man. By the way, he's got his son by the arm, grabbing, and the son's arm is up like that. And the son is crying and going, "What is this?" He said, "You grabbed my son." And of course, I didn't grab his son. I blah, blah, blah. But the son was crying, but he's crying because his dad had him by the arm.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you arrested. So he went down and swore a warrant for my arrest the next morning. By the way, I'd call my family because I was shaken. They got in the car and drove up to Richmond. And police, by the way, I'd gone out, and when I got back, my neighbor said there was a policeman here. And I went, wow. So anyway, Sunday morning they came back, they knocked, I was served the warrant, the policeman had to stay with me, I got dressed. They actually put me in what we would call a police wagon, what wasn't a squad car. I was handcuffed. And that family was standing out watching me be led away in handcuffs. It was a pretty devastating moment.
Yeah.
So anyway, it would come to pass that, no, the family actually, they weren't supposed to have children in their apartment, and they'd find that out soon because they had made a big deal out of this, and they would have to move. But more importantly, I went to court. My principal came. Nobody got to spoke because the dad was there, the mom was there, and the two children were there running up and down the court, just running. And the judge slammed his thing on the gavel down and said, "What is this?" He went to the person and said, "What case is this?" I said, "Well, it's the so-and-so against blah, blah, blah. He apparently blah, 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 his child." And they said, he stopped and said, he pointed at me and the lawyer and said, just stay there. You, come up here. And brought that man up and read him the riot act. Oh, wow. He said, "I'm not even going to entertain this charge. Having seen your children, I'm going to recommend," and he recommended something that either those that the court would have a court-appointed something come over to their house and interact with them, because he could tell that this was a frivolous charge, and dismissed it. And everybody walked out, and I had to pay $300 for the lawyer. He never even spoke because this guy solved it for me.
Oh,
anyway, so my dad, realizing that I had to solve that problem on my own. He was there, but I'm the one that had to go to jail. I'm the one that had to go to court. My dad had problems in his early life trying to keep a job. He was a little unmotivated. He was an only child. He just, his mother, by the way, bless her heart, didn't know any better than to give him a drink every day when he got up, just to get him going. She'd pour him a shot of something, and he'd toss it back and go out there and you can do it. And so after a while, you learn that if you're a little bit down, maybe you need a shot. You need a shot to get you going. And what had happened was that had become 2 shots and maybe 3 shots. And sometimes you feel a lot lighter when you had a few shots. Your inhibitions are gone, and maybe you will actually go out and get a job. You'll tell somebody what you're worth. When sober, you're feeling all the weight of the world. So anyway, my dad finally had realized that he needed help and had done the right thing, went to AA. And AA gives you this beautiful card that has this great prayer: "Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." Dad reached down his wallet, he got that card out, and he gave it to me. And at first I thought, what's this? Because I'm still dumb. I mean, I'm still a kid. I'm grown up, but I'm going, what does this mean? And it meant that he couldn't give me anything more powerful than the invitation to go forth and do that. And what I realized was that was what my dad and my mom did. My mom did too. I'm focused on my dad because these were very specific things that were life-changing moments for me.
Right.
And what I realized was, wow, I get to be my parents then, because that's what they've instilled in me through their sacrifice. My dad took him a year to buy me a guitar for $13.95. There was no tax back then. I'd understand that later. At the time, I didn't. When Dad gave me that card, I didn't realize what he was admitting in his life, that he was weak and needed help. And what he was telling me was, don't worry about stuff. You know, stuff could happen to you, but you don't dwell on it. You look forward to things. You celebrate the good things in your life, and some of the bad stuff, just duck. Or if it hits you, just shake it off, which you do when you're in Little League and you fall down. They say, get up, shake it off. And you literally shake it off. Wow. So it's my dad who just, without really knowing he was doing that, he was giving away everything to me. And I was in a good place to receive it. I was open to that. And so I think about how I honor both my mom and my dad is by the way I behave. That's a great question too, because it reminds me that this is our one shot at this. We don't get pass two at life. We get one pass at it. By the way, tomorrow's not for certain. Heck, driving down I-65 is not for a certain. Yeah. So what did I do just before that? Did I greet someone well? Did I say something kind to somebody? One more. Jimmy Stewart in the movie Harvey. You should see it. It's one of the great films of all time. It's a kind of a comedy. Elwood P. Dowd is kind of folks think he's a little crazy because he sees a rabbit that's 6 feet too tall and he's invisible. Nobody sees Harvey but Elwood P. Dowd. Okay. And Jimmy Stewart is the perfect person to play that. So I won't tell you the whole story because it's one of the funniest and one of the most deeply moving films I've ever seen. And this is a defining moment in my life, and I could actually show you his sister takes him to the insane asylum or to the place to have him put away because he's embarrassing everybody. Every time she has to have a party, he walks in and wants to introduce Harvey to everybody. And they know that he's crazy because there's no rabbit there. But the head doctor the head psychiatrist at the sanitarium, one night after having a couple of martinis, he sees Harvey and wants to know from Elwood, how is it that you found, where in the world did you find such a thing? Everybody, and it's just magnificent. Of course, he's a little drunk, and so we kind of go, well, of course he saw him because he's drunk. However, the story is this beautiful that Harvey is real, and we have to learn to see him. The doctor says, man, your sister brought you here today to have you put away. Everyone is against you. Don't you have any righteous indignation? And Jimmy Stewart, in his beautiful acting manner, says, oh, doctor, my mom, my mother, she'd say Elwood. She always called me Elwood. She'd say, Elwood, in this life you must be oh so smart or oh so pleasant. For years I was smart. I recommend pleasant. And you may quote me. And I think about, again, the metaphor in that film of all those forces operating against us. And when we meet them with resistance, we meet them with how smart we are to finagle ourselves around it, we miss the opportunity to be the true people we are. And it's not that we let people walk all over us, but he didn't see anything as an obstacle. He saw everything as an opportunity. Some people would say, no, we got to solve this right now, but he would wait and wait and wait. And guess what? It turned out exactly as it should. Because he had patience. Which, by the way, is a short commodity in this day and age. We kind of think, well, no, I can get this information right now. Why would I want to wait? And Elwood waited. And he outwaited everybody. Everybody was upset and angry, and he wasn't. And it's because they thought he was crazy. No. He saw something that they could not see, which takes me to the movie Santa Claus with Tim Allen, who was the Tool man back in the day. Yes. And he falls asleep, wakes up the next day. He's Santa Claus. They take him to the North Pole. Judy comes in with hot cocoa that she's been making for 800 years or 400 years or something, and he says, I just saw a polar bear down there directing traffic. I see this, but I don't believe it. And then she says, seeing isn't believing. Believing is seeing. Be oh so smart or oh so pleasant. And why would you need to see it to believe it? And that means that you work on your inner person to figure these things out so that when you're around other people, you're not questioning all the time. You already have a presence, a place. You already have that person inside you that's free to make an observation. That is true. You don't need people's permission to do that. You come at it with your own authority.
I want to be conscientious of your time because I know you have to go. And so I wanted to kind of start wrapping up by asking a little bit, just a few questions, a few short questions. Sure. The answers don't have to be short, but they can be. Who do you turn to when you're looking for advice or for help?
A physical person is my brother,
Okay.
who's 2.5 years older than I. And Lee, being the older brother, was the one who, when you're first in line, you're the one that's most responsible. You're the one parents will say, no, you can't do this. You got to get an A. You got to stay in school. You got blah, 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 blah. So my brother faced all of that while I got to kind of duck out of the way and go do what I wanted to do. By that time, it's not that we had a lot of kids. It was just, but I was the second one and Lee was the first. Yeah. And so that's taken some time for me to recognize that my brother will always be my older brother. He'll always be the one who has had a first experience in something. Now, music, no, I'm that. And he's always celebrated me for being that. But in life, I've always enjoyed being ready to have my brother tell me truths. Yeah. And so I accept that. And it's really that way. I'm so happy that I have him. And we'll honor that for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. That's great. When you think of the word successful, who comes to mind?
Well, I've already mentioned them all. Mr. Price, that great teacher who all he wanted to do was sing for us. I think about my choral director, Mr. Miller, who waited me out in the 8th grade, did not get angry with me. He simply let me sit there and stew until I found out what was wrong. He didn't point out anything. It's really neat. Again, my dad, who knew enough to tell me, or at least share with me those things that would help me be a better person. Of course, my brother, who was there, by the way, the day I almost got my body cut open by an axe at Boy Scout camp because I was teasing a boy who was much bigger than I. But he had low self-esteem. I wouldn't know what low self-esteem was for years. I just knew I could tease him and he'd cry. And I pissed him off at that one point. He got out his axe and was running after me. Of course, he was a little bit clumsy and I was way ahead of him. But my brother saw him coming and, first of all, controlled him, got the axe out of his hand, and then looked at me. And I'll never forget that look because there I was. What are you doing? You're a little shrimp. And you're teasing this boy? What gives you authority to do that? How could you think you could win? He could have killed you. Do you understand that? So, my brother constantly kind of reminds me, so, and success for me is how people are being themselves. It has nothing to do with their station in the world. Mr. Price, a teacher, Mr. Miller, a teacher, my dad, who, by the way, didn't have a formal education. He had to kind of get a job based on gathering enough information to be able to get into the job, then show them what he could do. He didn't have the skills at the outset. My brother, by the way, failed college the first year and had to join the Navy because he would have gone to Vietnam. So he had to learn some things. I went right through school. Got a job, became successful. My brother would come out of the Navy and then have to get back into school and finally reach that place where Mobil Oil picked him up. And he spent his entire career one of the top people in the company finally before he retired.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So anyway, those, success for me is measured in those achievements that have nothing to do with measuring it by, I guess I've not looked at, how does the world perceive them? It's just that what it meant to me to be a witness to that.
That's great. What is something that you're trying to improve in your life right now?
Wow. All right. It has to do with my lovely new bride, Kimberly, whom I met a year ago more here, not here, but we met at church. we've both seen and admired each other because we're colleagues here.
Yeah.
We've known each other for that long, and she's had a different pathway, and I've had a different pathway. But I've been on my own for about 6 years. My marriage stopped in 2010, and it was a mutual thing. My lovely bride needed to just be out of this town. She was not in a good place, and the only thing to do was to accept that, not to argue it. And what we did was we agreed that for her to move someplace would give her a chance to figure it out. And eventually, when that became her environment, I realized you can't go there, because if you do, it's going to be you again, and she needs to be there on her own. So we decided mutually to let this go. But the thing was, I got to be on my own for 6 years. That was 2010, 2005 years, let's call it. And then I met Kimberly. And gosh, when you're on your own a while, you just kind of put things where you like them. You set things down. It's pretty much the way it's going. And now somebody's in. Now you can have affections for them, but you've got to make room. Not just physical room, but you got to have some psychological room for them. And what has been magnificent over these last year and a half or so, as we have gotten to know each other, then we're married in May of a year ago, was, oh my gosh, look at this. I'm getting to consider what you think and where you would like something to be, rather than becoming crotchety and, set in my ways, which, by the way, had I stayed by myself, I wouldn't have been a hermit. I would have just been, no, that's okay, I'll do this, thank you. Which, by the way, in some ways, I already like that. I kind of like being able to go, don't worry, guys, I'll do this. Because it's kind of that old adage, if you want it done right, you do it yourself.
Right.
And it's not that you don't trust anybody, but look, let me just do this. Okay, good. Now what are we going to do? Because I did that. I feel better about myself because I did this. I get to do these things with Kimberly. There are times when, at the beginning, she said, well, don't forget I'm here too. Oh, that's right. Oh. And I was making an adjustment to having someone physically close to me and emotionally close to me. I hadn't practiced that in a long time. And what I find is that's something you can practice every day. And after a while, you get better at it. I'm getting better at considering her in the mix of things. Noticing a mood that she might be in. Noticing, well, wait, let me grab that, because you have to get those. Let me grab this bag, and I'll get my bag. Today, when we came from the Iron Tribe workout, we stopped at Subway so we could get some lunch, because we won't get lunch because we have Westman-Jigger in 30 minutes. But I realized, she said, well, look, you have this to go to. How about if you just park over here and I'll walk back to where her building, which is all the way across campus. And went, no, I'll park in your building and I'll walk back. And she already said it's okay. I would have been fine. I could have. I was a space over here right by the library. And I thought, no, Dean, this is not about you anymore. It's not that it's about her. It's about us. So I'm getting to work on all those things I'd put down. I'd kind of not locked things up. I just kind of said, well, okay, well, I'm not using this. I'm not using my sharing ability, my partnering ability. I do it at school. But when I get away from school, it's all me. And now I'm getting to, by the way, let me honor one more person in the midst of this, Bill Finlaw, who at Florida State University, I'd kind of lost myself. I'd kind of gotten down that pathway of all my courses are done. I've got to write a dissertation. Oh, Lord, how do I do that? And I got emotionally drained and spiritually drained. And some friends saw that. I was over their house one night and said, Dean, you just don't look like you're doing anything. Because you usually come over and tell us what's happening. You can't wait to start this next part of your work here. And you haven't said anything about that in a while. And I said, well, yeah, I've kind of looked at the library like it's a big mouth. And every time I walk through the door, I'm afraid it's going to close on me. I'm never going to get out. I'm worried I'm not going to finish this. And I can't go home. I quit my job there. I can't go anywhere without this. But I don't feel like I'm doing anything. So they recommended an Episcopal priest who was also a psychologist, Bill Finlaw, said, call him. You're working at the hospital now. You have insurance that you could, it would help pay for the sessions you have with him. So I talked to Bill Finlaw for a year. A year.
Oh, wow.
Every Wednesday or every Monday, went over and just sat in a chair. And he'd talk and I'd listen and I'd talk and he'd listen. And here's what he heard me say. I was talking about the stuff I had to do. Like when I got out, I have to. And he stopped me and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. You have to breathe. You have to take in enough food, and you have to expel waste. These are the things you have to do. Mm-hmm. What else is there? I thought, what? And it's semantic, but no, it's not. It's a way of life. Mm-hmm. Deen, you get to do everything else. So he started making me listen to my own voice, and I soon had to go, well, every word was a have to. I thought, oh, this is how you're viewing the world, Deen, around you. You're having to do this stuff. Are you kidding me? That's not the way you were before you came here. Think about your teaching life and how they helped pull you off of that pedestal. And what you were doing then was all get-tos. But things had changed. I was afraid of the library. I was afraid of what that was going to do to me. So I was making up anything I could just to show how pitiful it was for me to be on the planet. Look, they're making me do this. And so Bill Finlaw helped me stop that. And then I had to start practicing saying the word get to, and I just did it before I told you about him. I just went, oh, I just said that. I get to be with Kimberly. And what a difference that's made in just how I look at things around me. There are no chores. Yes, it's going to take some work to do a little thing, but isn't that great? The fact that you get to work at it? Come on, look at these hands. Look at this brain. Look at all we have. So anyway, Bill Finlaw, thank you.
Second to last question.
Okay, good.
What is an inexpensive purchase that you've made semi-recently that has made an extremely impactful difference in your life?
Give me a sec. Okay, an expensive purchase. Under $100?
Under $100.
Under $100, okay. Man, I'm just thinking about those things that cost a little bit more than $100. But
well, what are one of those?
I don't know. I treated myself to my Legos. I put all that away because I was under a different living arrangement in my first marriage. Person was not, why do you need that? I have to tell you, one of the things I think I valued the most is my Jeep, because I paid cash for it, and I'd already owned 3 cars before that, and you have to get a loan. So you get a loan, you pay it off in 5 years, and all the time you're fixing it up, but you're still paying for it. I thought, I'd like to do something different. And so because I get to wave my hands now, people will pay me to go someplace and wave my hands. And when I get that money, it's not a part of my income that I need. I put it in the bank. So I opened up a bank account years ago. And I had my eye on a Jeep Wrangler. I thought, no, I'm not going to buy it until I can afford it. It took me 4.5 years to earn enough money to pay for it. Oh, wow. In 2007, I bought my Jeep Wrangler. Walked in and said, here we go. And thank you for the keys. And by the way, 9 years later, I have my new Jeep Wrangler out here. I bought that with cash. Because I've been doing the same thing. Get to wave my hands. I don't need the money. Put it away and the account goes up. And I've already started. I've already begun this whole spring. All the good stuff that I've gotten to do. The money's in the bank. I'm not going to buy another car. I may buy another car at some point, but I know that's more money than that. But the value in it was that I was patient, I waited for it, and I bought something only after I could afford it. And I think about that in terms of even the small stuff. I'll turn down sometimes. I'll go into the Converse store and just go, no, I have a lot of shoes, so I don't need those. But I practice frugality by going up and looking at something and going, you know what, not right now. Mm-hmm. So I think part of it is being wise in how we consume things and knowing that my dad was the greatest teacher of all. I couldn't afford the tires on my car, and I needed 2. He said, I'll buy one of them. And I went, what good's that going to do? to me, Dad, I need 4 tires. I thought you'd help me out. You'd buy these 2 and then I'd pay you back sometime. He said, no, let's do this. I can buy one of your tires right now. You have to save up to buy your other tire. $25 was all it cost for the tire. He said, let me know when you have it, and we'll go down, and I'm sure you'll buy it before the tire gets bald. And I did. So Dad bought a tire, I bought a tire. All of a sudden, I'm coming to a stoplight a little bit more carefully. I'm taking off from the stoplight a little more carefully because I've got $25 under the driver's side of that car that I paid for. Thank you, Dad. I get it. I don't really appreciate stuff because if it's given to me, then I just kind of expect more stuff to be given to me. And Dad said, no, buy that tire. So when I got to buy 2 tires of my own, boy, did I take it easy. What a great guy.
To close us off, what advice would you give to somebody?
4 tools I learned in a book called The Creative Spirit. I'll show it to you some other time.
Okay.
This is just what a prescription for our being on the planet. While we're breathing, we should be doing these 4 things. And these are not mine. These belong to these authors, but I believe in them because I found myself in the midst of all 4 of these. The first is belief in your ability to, now I'll leave that blank, because the first thing we do is we wonder, am I worthy, not am I worthy, but could I be doing this? And it starts with belief. It doesn't start with training or anything. It starts with a belief in ourselves. So it's belief in our ability to. And by the way, we can be way down in the hole, way down. We'll never get out unless we believe we can. I know that could be naive. Oh, I believe I can get out. Well, no. Well, you're not taking action yet. You're simply setting up your mind to give you enough courage to do the thing that needs to be done. So it starts with belief. Okay. The second one in this book is called The Voice of Judgment, which, by the way, if I believe I'm going to do something, but I look up and go, but look how far that is. I'm too small. I'm too short. I'm not strong. That's the voice of judgment, which, by the way, operated outside of us for the beginning of our life. Honey, don't touch that. It's hot. Don't put that fork in there. We get the voice of judgment that keeps us from harm. And sometimes we get the voice of judgment that says, that's not what a tree looks like. We're at school and we're trying to color in a tree and we're using purple. They're going, no, trees are brown. Are you crazy? Mm-hmm. And the voice of judgment comes at us from the outside. After a while, we begin to adopt that because we'd look down and go, oh, yeah, that's right. That was dumb. And we've just told ourselves that we don't value something. So we have to control that voice of judgment. We have to give it a purpose. Because if we're going to believe in ourselves, then we have to control that. We have to find a way to get that voice of judgment to be quiet, or at least to help us figure out what the right pathway is, which leads us to thing 3, which is make precise observations about things around you. If you want to know something, look at it for what it is. Absolutely study it. And that precise observation leads to the 4th thing, which is ask penetrating questions. So, no matter where you are, if you have belief in your ability to do something, it'll be followed by, well, wait a minute, what are the obstacles? No, I do not value that. Hush, because that's the voice that's going to keep you from taking any steps. Yeah. And then 3 would be, well, then what do you see? Look at it. Look at everything. And then once you've seen it, we'll ask the question about what could it be? I wonder what would happen if I did this. And by the way, it doesn't mean you don't look up on YouTube when you don't know how to frickin' do something. I got a video and it went, here's how you do it, and I did it. Because the YouTube video said, take this and put it on this and go here, go there. Oh. So, but it starts with, I had to believe that I was capable of that. Mm-hmm. And I had to stop the voice that said, Dean, you're not good enough, you're not tall enough, you're not smart enough. Shh. And then go look at it. And then ask questions. That's the 4 greatest things I think I've ever discovered that are all linked to each other and end up helping us propel ourselves into anything. Yeah. And by the way, knowing the difference between, well, you know what, I think I'm going to go down and get in a jet and fly it tomorrow. No. That's not what that's about. It's not just saying great things about ourselves that aren't true. It's starting with belief, which everybody should have. We should all have that.
Hey, just a few more things before you take off. First of all, you can find links to everything we discussed in the show notes.
This episode was brought to you by our wonderful patrons. If you want to learn more about becoming part of the Patreon family and how you can unlock behind-the-scenes content, you can find us at patreon.com/Inside Music City.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can go to our Facebook page and let us know. You can comment on posts, pictures, videos, anything really. We love talking to you. Our Facebook is Inside Music City, and be sure to give us a like.
And finally, please, please, please forward this episode to someone you feel like would enjoy listening to or learning from our conversation today.
And again, thank you so much everyone for listening. You're awesome.